Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to A Smooth Move by yourdependablepartner.com. And my name is Brian Sachs, and my partner Joel Sagner. We have a wonderful guest with a very, very important topic to discuss today. And our special guest is Melissa O'Connor, Esquire. And Melissa's practice is specifically elder law, wills, estates, trusts, probate, I'm assuming, um, and everything that comes along with it. And, you know, it's a topic none of us really want to confront, obviously. Okay. But it's always a good idea to plan. And planning means, in my opinion, making sure that your wishes are actually carried out the way you wish them to be. Um,
Yes.
and so obviously assets come into that. Uh, your income comes into that. Your needs obviously come into that. And for lack of a better term, there's no better captain that I have found for this ship than Melissa, who really knows and shares some things that I've never heard others talk about. So your approach is a little bit different. So without further ado, I want to welcome you, Melissa. I want to thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this particular area of law, and maybe we'll share some good tips for our viewers and listeners.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Um, so I kind of got into elder law as I don't know, second or third phase of my life, right? Um, I was originally an environmental scientist. That's what I went to school and studied and did professionally for many, many years. I then went back to school to get a JD. Thought I was going to do environmental law, which I did do for many years. And I worked in large firms doing that type of work. And it wasn't really conducive to raising a family, that type of work. And so I thought to myself, oh no, I need to do a change again, right? Like I was a scientist, now I'm a lawyer. I'm going to change careers a third time. And I remember that I took this elder law class when I was in law school. I thought it was interesting. I really like helping people. Have like a good relationship with my grandparents, kind of felt like a connection to that client base. And I thought, okay, let's explore this as our plan C, right? And so I decided I was going to launch my own practice and I was going to transition practice areas all at one fell swoop. And so
Great.
that's what I did. I went and took continuing education classes, right? Like how to get up to speed, learn what's going on in this field. And so I did this boot camp where they basically immerse you in this area of law. I studied and researched and basically told all my friends and family that this is what I do now. And part of that, I also started video content, right? Because I'm learning new things and I was sharing it with others as I learned and explored. And my video content kind of took off as well. So it became just a natural catalyst for me to get clients, for lack of a better, free marketing, that kind of thing. But I haven't looked back. I did that, thinking that this would be a type of practice that I could have a better lifestyle, be healthier, be there present for my family. And I found that now I'm really able to help a lot of other families, right, in a meaningful way, in times, scary times, many times, right, like crisis,
Confusing, confusing times. Right,
yeah,
for
right. You have
sure.
some sort of health issue, something happened, which triggers all these uncomfortable conversations, right? Um, and I enjoy it. I find it never the same thing, right? It's no two families are the same. We have some similar dynamics, but they're not identical. And you make a meaningful difference in people's everyday lives. And so it's very fulfilling for me. So that's what
Well, it's
I really
awesome.
like it.
I have to just jump in and say this because, look, any attorney can put a will together. I mean, it's not, I see lots of people advertising, but I give the analogy, Melissa. Tell me if you think this is appropriate. if I broke my toe, I'm not calling my dentist, although they're both doctors. Okay. And so the point I want to make here is that this is your area of expertise. And there are so many turns and twists, Medicare, Medicaid, asset protection, all sorts of different things that happen. Number one, you want to be proactive, do it before it happens.
Right.
And number two, you want to go to someone, not just an attorney. That's my point here. You don't want to go to an attorney. You want to go to an elder law specialty attorney that this is what they do. So they go deep and they know the ins and outs and the loopholes. And that's the point I want to make. But maybe you can share some of those twists with us.
Yeah. So essentially, I think most people in America don't realize that Medicare, which everybody has when you get 65, right? Like we all say, oh, we have Medicare benefits, we got good coverage or what have you. Most people don't realize that Medicare doesn't pay for long-term care, meaning Medicare will pay for healthy people, right? Like you can go to the doctor, you can get your prescriptions, you can get your well visits, you can get sick and get better. You might even, have a surgery and go to the hospital. And as long as you recover from that surgery, right, and don't need anything else, Medicare is great. It'll pay for it. When you run into problems where you had surgery and you're not getting better, right? And so now you have these extra long-term care needs, like you're going to need a home health nurse if you're going to safely go back home. You might need other assistance with different activities of daily living. You might somebody might experience cognitive decline, right? Medicare is not a good coverage for those sorts of problems. In this country, if you need more than that, more than what Medicare can offer you, you end up cash paying for that care. Unless you bought long-term care insurance, right, when you were younger, that might be a good source. If people have that. Most people don't, right? I don't know what the percentages are, but I know it's less than 50% have long-term care health insurance. And those that have long-term health insurance, many times it's inadequate, right? Like their policy was such that they ran through all the benefits and they're still here, still having needs. And how are we going to pay for that? And that's where things like VA aid and attendance benefits, if you actually qualify as a wartime veteran, or Medicaid would come in this country. And both of those benefits, well, you have to medically qualify as well as financially qualify. And for the VA, you have to also qualify as a wartime veteran, which is a very specific window of time.
Or a spouse, I believe.
And so people just don't realize that the expense, I think, of growing old, getting sick in this country. I think that's usually the biggest unknown that people face.
Yep.
For the VA aid and attendance, a spouse is also entitled, in my understanding. I mean,
surviving spouses.
Surviving spouse. I got it.
Are entitled.
For my mother, after my father was a World War II veteran. And then I
Correct.
couldn't get them to stop paying me when she died, which was a whole conversation for a different day.
Yeah. No. Yeah, surviving spouses. But if the wartime veteran is alive and healthy and doesn't need the benefits, the spouse isn't going to be able to qualify for the benefits during their lifetime. Yeah. It's only if the surviving spouse.
And they really did a number on me. I mean, they asked me so many questions and papered me to death. They did everything but like a proctology exam is what I felt like. It was everything.
Those are challenging benefits to apply for. Yeah. I will say that there's a lot of paperwork. And the other crazy thing is there is a whole window of years that the DOD does not have records because there was some sort of fire in some government building. And so if you don't have your records, they don't have them either for a certain period of time. And that makes it also troubling and difficult to get your benefits in place. That they don't make it easy.
So let's say one of our viewers is a 50-year-old person and their parents are up in age and it's obviously a very challenging subject, especially if you have siblings, right? To say like, well, who's getting what and when are you going kind of conversation. And I don't mean that to be harsh or terrible, but
Right.
I mean, you know,
It's a reality. It's where a lot of families have a lot of conflict
yeah.
and then end up, having rifts where they don't speak to each other. It's really bad.
Yeah.
So
You have to be
what's
prepared.
the first step here? Like what should they do? Or if you're watching this and you are the senior who's maybe up in age in 80s, 90s, hundreds, what's the first step? What do we do?
So I like to, well, my client would be the elderly person, right? So many times I do get introduced to my clients from their adult children, right? Like they might have found me on my video content or something like that and said, hey, this is who I think, would be really helpful. And I always let them know I have no problem talking about, what options are available for your parent. But at the end of the day, it would be your parent deciding that they would want me as their attorney, right? You can't hire me for them. Like that's not how that works. They have to want me, and they're the client. And at the end of the day, they're going to tell me the direction that we go in. And so, what I like to do is make sure that I have those conversations with my client and get really clear as to what their goals are, right? What do they see themselves, their future? Who do they trust and most to make different important decisions? Sometimes I have to have conversations about the fact we don't need to follow birth order, right? Like just because I'm the firstborn, right? So I'm an oldest. I know that there's like expectations, right? But that might not be the person that is the best decision maker for certain things just because they were born first, right? Sometimes we have people who are good with money, but not necessarily the most caring people, right? So they might be the person we put in charge of our financial power of attorney. And then we might pick another person to be our medical surrogate, right? Somebody who's more of a nurturer, maybe somebody who has medical experience and can, explain what's going on and follow the conversations of doctors and nurses. But we have those conversations as to like who are the people that we should be picking. And we also then talk about what our goals are for aging, right? Like, are we aging in place? Do we feel like we want to move into a community to age in, right? A lot of my clients like to talk about legacy, right? And I can create your will and your trust and make sure that you have your stuff goes to who you want it to go to. Those are not my most important conversations, in my opinion, right? Like I'll have those conversations. I have no problem drafting those documents. But me as an elder law attorney who has seen like the end, right? Like I've walked with my clients from that early conversation all the way through till passing. And then I administered their estate or their trust or what have you. My goal for my client is quality of life. I don't care if they don't have any money to leave to their children. I don't care if we spend every dime to make their life better during their lifetime. That's my goal. My goal is to make sure that while they're present on this earth, that they have dignity, that they have great care, right? And that they have a wonderful experience. I don't care as much about legacy. But I care about sheltering our money so that we can make it stretch so that way they can have this great life. That's really the conversations that I like to have. And if there's money left at the end for a legacy, great. You know what I mean? Like we'll take those considerations as well. But as an elder law attorney, not just estate planners talk about legacy. Elder law attorneys, we talk about like more quality of life and long-term care planning and how are we going to take care of you, right? So that's kind of the difference from just your perspective.
I would say, Melissa, what you just said there is exactly why people are drawn to you. You are looking at a holistic piece, not just, like you said, not just money, not just who's getting what. Because in the end, if they don't enjoy the time that they have, what is the point, right?
Right.
And that is a really amazing quality that you have, and you can really see that you are genuine about it. And we haven't known each other that long, but I moved down here to be with my elderly parents and help them. And we did a will and trust and all that stuff. And one thing that you said to me, I wasn't privy to their conversation because it's theirs, not mine. And one thing that you said in one of our conversations was about this layering of having three people. You don't just have one, um, power of attorney for your medical. You have to have people underneath if that person, if I'm understanding correctly, can't meet their responsibilities, and you've got a next, and you've got a next. And
Right.
that really resounded with me because I think, we like life to go in the order that it should go, like parents before children, but sometimes children go before parents. And if they're your designee in some way, then what do you do?
Right. Yeah, I like to have a couple layers deep. That's what I tell people. And some people don't have enough people in their life to go a couple
Sure,
layers deep,
true.
or at least not enough trusted people, right? Like I don't need any, untrustworthy people.
Of
But
course.
we have people experience cognitive decline, right? And so it's sometimes those are some hard conversations where I tell like the caregiver spouse, I'm like, we can't name your spouse who we know has cognitive issues as your agent. Like that's just not fair to them to put them
Right.
in that awkward position, right? And it's not safe for you to have that. So we have those conversations. And then we also have to have the conversation of that same caregiver spouse. They can't be the only person listed as their unwell, their sick spouse's agent, because the statistics of caregiving are that you wear down and you get sick. There are so many examples of caregivers dying before the person with the disease dies, right? Just
Absolutely.
because they neglected themselves, they, sacrificed themselves, they martyred themselves to the point that they pass away first, right? And then you have this person with dementia, Parkinson's, whatever it is, right? You name the ailment, with nobody listed in place as the backup, right? Because the caregiver spouse was the one and only name listed, and now they're no longer here. And we have a mess, right? Like we have to file for guardianship. People fight over who's going to be the next person, right? A whole mess that we could have just avoided had we named a couple layers deep. We would have known, hey, if it's not my wife, I want whatever, my son,
Right.
my sister. It doesn't matter who. I don't care. I always tell folks, I do not care who you name. All I want to know is, do you trust this person, right? Like, is this your person? That's the only care in my world. So yeah, I don't, I let them know clearly that's not something. Yeah.
Now, as a follow-up to that, it sounds to me like you're following up with your clients on a regular basis. As let's say today, somebody names their spouse as their first, and then they have their second and third, but then something happens and their spouse isn't capable and they want to change the order or whatever. I don't know. You're following up them on a regular basis, or do your clients reach out to you once a year? How does that
So
life
I don't
go?
necessarily say you have to come call me every year, right? Like there are some people who sell you a package where you will get a meeting with them for a review. And that's great. I mean, that's their business strategy, and that's how they make sure that they stay in contact with their clients. I stay in contact with my clients through my newsletter, right? I send out my newsletter, and I really depend on them to reach back out when things come up. I don't charge consult fees, so they know that they can call me if something pops up, and they can get on my calendar, and I'm not going to charge them for that conversation, right?
Wow.
I'll just have that same conversation I had with a potential client, whether I can help you or not. The same thing with a existing former client. I'll let you know if I can help you or not. And if it's something that we can just talk about and point you in the right direction, you're off and running, great. I don't charge for that. I'd rather you send me work. I can, whatever.
Right.
And most of the time then, if there's something I can help them with, then, we'll send, put up together a proposal and a plan as to how we're going to implement that
Sure.
and move forward.
Melissa, I bet you I'm like 100,000 or a million people in South Florida.
Mhm.
I'm in my 60s and I moved to Florida from a different state. I know that's not a unique situation, right?
Mhm.
And in Maryland, I had all of our affairs in order a long time ago. So we did a will, we did a power of attorney, we did a medical power of attorney, we did there's a name for it where God forbid if I'm, want to resuscitate or don't resuscitate.
Right, right. Oh, the living will, the
Yeah,
DNR.
living power. Yeah, we did all of that. And we even said who our kids were going to go to should something happen. 2 layers deep, as you said. And they're both married now with kids, so that's irrelevant. Um, so is an out-of-state will enforceable? If I have a will in Maryland, well, I mean, we should be getting a new will anyway because
Right,
our circumstance has changed.
correct.
But
Yeah, it's
what's the guidance
definitely
there?
enforceable, right? As long as it was legally invalid in your home state and properly executed pursuant to the laws of that state, we can use it to probate your estate here in Florida. Why you would really want to change it is because many times, particularly if you created your will when your children were still minors, right? You probably listed siblings of yours or other adults in your world that weren't your kids as your executor, as different roles, right? And they might not, one, they might not still be alive, right? Like I've had that where like, they predeceased you, or they might not be appropriate because they're sickly, or they're just, you've fallen out with people. I've had that too, where people fall
Never,
out with each
never, ever,
other.
never, ever.
And
Say that sarcastically.
yeah, and it's just that's why we would want to update it. And there would be like no mention of grandchildren in there. Sometimes people want to make provisions for
Yeah,
grandchildren now that
it's a
they have them.
completely different ball game than when you
Correct.
started it. But are there any laws in Florida that would be particularly different than in Maryland? Well, I'm not
So,
putting you on
For other
spot for
states.
Maryland or
right.
anything.
Right.
So, one of the things that you would want to have in place, I would be looking at if you had out of state documents, would be my power of attorney document. I would want a Florida based power of attorney document because our statute has what they call like superpower provisions, essentially certain terms. If you want your agent to have these authorities, they need to have initialed next to them. Not all states have that same provision. And if you're going to be working with Florida entities that would be looking for initials next to certain, authority, and you're working on an out-of-state document, it's just you're making things more complicated for yourself than you need to try to say no, it's enforced. Um, I think you're just better off with your home state's
I
documents
mean, is your
there.
planning, Melissa, also involved in how to properly pass on this estate for tax purposes with the minimal impact?
Um,
Do you cover any
yes,
of that in your?
I cover some of that. With that said, Florida we don't have a state estate tax, right? Like, a state death tax, whatever people want to talk about.
Oh,
We
Maryland
just
does.
follow
Maryland, it's
the,
expensive to die in Maryland.
yeah, yeah, other states do. And so we follow the federal limit, which I've never had any client that had over, used to be 13 million. I think it's even higher. I've never had any clients that had that much assets, right? I know that they're out there and they can go to those high net worth estate planning attorneys to talk about that kind of tax planning. I do seek to avoid probate if all possible with my planning, right? So that way we can just pass our assets to each other without the need of judicial intervention. That usually also creates benefits, where people can get like step up in basis and things of those natures, right, to reduce any sort of tax implications there. But yeah, here in Florida, we don't really have to do too much estate tax planning per se like that, just because of the threshold that we're working with. Obviously, if they change the threshold, that would change our dynamics. And if you were in a different state, like you said, Maryland, California, these other places, those are definitely states where you have to do trust planning because the way that they calculate their taxes,
Even like
is
for
different.
real estate, if you want to sell the property, my wife and I own a house.
Mhm.
Probably should be putting it in a trust is my guess.
Yeah.
So, the trust should be owning the house, not either of us personally,
So yeah, the benefits of having your house in a trust versus just having it individually is one, if you became incapacitated, right? Your trustee would be able to sell your house, rent out your house, do all these things, right? You could have your agent under a power of attorney do those same sorts of acts, right? And the other thing with a trust, having your home in trust, is you have that whole legacy planning, right? That you might be able to allow the house to just stay in the trust, even though, both of the grantors, the people who made the trust, might pass on, and the house could just still stay in the trust and be used by the family as, their summer home or whatever it is. Because lots of times people have condos down here, different things like that, where their relatives just come in vacation and use the house that way. So that's the benefits of trusts, and why for revocable living trust, like the average trust that most people think of. That's not an asset protection trust. It's not going to prevent you from having creditors attached. It has no asset protection. Though an asset protection trust would have to be an irrevocable trust, where the person who made the trust is not the trustee of their trust. So lots of people want to talk about those sorts of fancy trusts. And then once they hear what that really means and like how they really operate, many people will back off and say, oh, that's really not what I'm interested in. Because our American culture is, we like to be in control of our destiny, right? Like it's our money. As long as I'm alive and have a brain, I'm going to be in charge, right? Like, and so an irrevocable trust, you're not going to be in charge anymore. So that's usually right there, the I'm out
It's
aspect.
interesting because I did this with my mother and father. I did an irrevocable trust where they could stay in the property, but I had the right. Years down the road, my mother sort of verified and proved that she was not capable of living in that home by herself through multiple bad decisions. And while she was in rehab, I literally sold the house.
Right.
And it was a painful, tough experience, but we did it to take the asset out for income issues.
Correct. Yeah.
For qualifying for certain benefits, and we
Correct.
prepaid for the funeral. We did a whole bunch of things.
Mhm.
At the end
So
of the
they
day,
were open to that kind of planning, evidently, which is great if you're open and understand the value of that planning, and you also understand that you won't be the trustee in charge of the decision making, right? And so
she
you
wasn't too
really have
happy
to
about
trust.
it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't her best interest, and she had a very nice life after that, most of it for 12 years. But yeah, I mean it's painful. It's
Yeah.
tough decisions, and I'm an only child, so it was much easier. There were no conversations with anyone. It was just,
Right.
here's what we're
Yeah.
doing, and
Right.
that's what we did.
The
So
flip side of that is, though, if you don't do that sort of planning and then they do need to get some sort of a higher level of care, then their assets are at risk.
Correct. Then we would have to do other sorts of what we call crisis planning, where we move money around. And now you might have tax implications that you probably wouldn't have had if you had it in an irrevocable trust. You would have other sorts of exposures, right, to Medicaid recovery that you wouldn't necessarily have had if you had done the pre-planning with the irrevocable trust. Irrevocable trusts are great. I'm not saying that they're not a great tool. They're a great tool for people who have the wherewithal to think ahead, right? And put it in place at least 5 years before you need the benefits, because that's kind of the window for the look back period, right? And you understand how it works and are comfortable with how it works, because they can be great. You have to, but the key is that you have a wonderful and good relationship with your trustee, and that
Right.
and that that they have your back and they're going to follow your wishes, to the best of their ability. And sometimes then they might end up making that hard call, like Brian had to do by
Yeah.
asset, that, there was a difference of opinion as to whether or not she could still safely live in that, that place, right? I'm sure she thought that she could still go home.
Yeah,
And
she couldn't.
and he
It
was
was
like,
very
no,
clear.
that's not in your best interest.
Yep.
And those are hard conversations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, any final pieces of advice here, Melissa? You want to tell us share any success stories you may have had, or?
Well, I think that the key for me is that you have these conversations, right? I think the more we talk about uncomfortable things, the easier it becomes, right? Also, recognize, this is just for everybody, I guess, if you're the elderly person and if you're the adult child, right? Recognize that sometimes we have shame around money, right? Like weird little hangups. And so that can color our conversations, and to just acknowledge that and realize that we can come back to these same conversations. It doesn't have to be all at one time or one and done, right? Like this is just the beginning, right? Like you can just little by little by little have these sorts of conversations to then unravel, your family's history, your family's goals, right? Your family dynamics, and just own them, right? And have those conversations and realize it can also change and shift, right? And so that's really what I find special about this practice, is just how families are kind of forced to have these talks and make these decisions. And really, you can have a lot of healing from it. So you could take something that felt like horrible, right? Getting old, getting sick. And if you do it a certain way, you can have just really change your family dynamics and have a wonderful time in your golden years.
So if someone needs to reach you, how do they do that, Melissa?
So they can reach out to me. My phone number is 954-637-1300. I'm on the web at o'connorelderlaw.com, OCONNORELDER.com. And I offer free strategy sessions. Like I said, you can get on my calendar, just eldermeeting.com. You can just pick a call time and I call you then. And there's no charge for that. And we can just chat about what's going on in your life.
Awesome. I can't thank you enough. I could talk to you honestly for hours and hours. So we're definitely going to have you come back, Melissa, assuming you're agreeable.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And Joelle, you want to tell everyone a little bit about your dependable partner and a smooth move?
At Your Dependable Partner, we help people downsize when they are moving into a senior living community, and we make sure that we take care of everything from soup to nuts, one price. So even, eliminate all those stresses so nobody has headaches. We know a lot of people are far away. They don't want maybe some of the things that have been in their home for 20 years, like the children don't want it, and they're far away. We will take care of auctioning it. We will give it to charitable donations. We will clear everything out, and we will make sure that everything is put in their new home as similarly as possible to their old home, so that they have that comfort level, feeling like they're still in their house.
Okay. And we'll be back again next week, everyone. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Joelle. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.